British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in Israel, beginning a visit in which he will meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog before travelling on to other regional capitals. Sunak expressed the United Kingdom's solidarity with Israel and shared his condolences over the loss of lives. In a statement ahead of his visit, Sunak said that the deadly blast at a Gaza hospital should be a watershed moment for leaders in the region and across the world to come together to avoid further dangerous escalation of conflict. He pledged that Britain will be at the forefront of this effort. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel will not stop aid entering Gaza from Egypt, but supplies will not be allowed into the enclave from the Israeli side. This comes after Netanyahu held talks with US President Joe Biden on Wednesday. Biden has called for the easing of the crisis in Gaza, with the UN warning of a humanitarian catastrophe. Netanyahu said Israel was taking this decision after a request from Biden, but added that Israel would continue the blockade of humanitarian aid from Israel into Gaza as long as Israeli hostages are not returned. Egypt, the only state apart from Israel to share a border with the Gaza Strip, has been stockpiling aid on its side of the border. However, the trucks have been unable to cross amid Israel's heavy airstrikes in its war with Hamas. The United States has vetoed a United Nations Security Council resolution that would have called for humanitarian pauses in the Gaza-Israel war for the humanitarian aid to flow. The vote on the resolution drafted by Brazil had been delayed twice as the United States, on its part, agreed on a deal with Egypt for an aid corridor. 12 members voted in favor of the draft text, while Russia and UK abstained from voting. Speaking at the UN meet, the Palestinian envoy made an emotional appeal to stop the bloodshed in Gaza. Riyad Mansour slammed the UN for failing to approve a resolution for humanitarian pause. Earlier on Monday, a Russian-drafted resolution that called for a humanitarian ceasefire failed to pass as well. Explosions hit the Israeli side of the Lebanon border day after Israel exchanged fire with Hezbollah. Large plumes of smoke rose over the border area after the explosions. Violence had escalated on the Lebanese border on Tuesday after 5 fighters from the heavily armed Hezbollah group were killed during operations against Israel. Israel has threatened that if Hezbollah opens a new front, Israel would retaliate and many will suffer the consequences. Dozens of boxes with 30 tons of aid for Gaza sent by the Venezuelan government has arrived in Egypt. Footage from Al Arish airport showed Red Crescent volunteers loading the boxing onto vehicles. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro spoke to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas over phone and pressed for the establishment of a humanitarian aid corridor to help the local population. In a televised interview, Venezuela's foreign minister said that the aid contains non-perishable food, water, first aid kits, medical supplies and power plants. The minister also said that they are coordinating with the Egyptian government to secure a corridor to allow aid to enter the Gaza Strip. US forces in Iraq have been targeted in 2 separate drone attacks. The first involved 2 one-way drones that targeted the Al-Assad base. One of the armed drones caused minor injuries to troops, even though the US military managed to intercept it. The second drone attack targeted the Al Harir air base that houses U.S. forces in the northern Iraqi city of Erbil. Washington is on heightened alert for activity by Iran-backed groups as regional tensions soar during the Israel-Hamas war. Flying home after a brief Tel Aviv visit, U.S. President Joe Biden has said that he had been blunt with the Israelis about the need to support getting aid to Palestinians in Gaza. Biden also pledged support to Israelis and humanitarian assistance to suffering Palestinians. Biden praised Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for agreeing to open the Rafah border crossing to allow 20 trucks carrying humanitarian aid into Gaza and pledged that the U.S. would get people trapped in Gaza out. The 20 trucks carrying aid via the Rafah crossing would cross into Gaza in coming days. Defense ministers of the US and UK has chaired a meet to discuss the confinement of further escalation of conflict in the West Asia, along with the training of Ukrainian troops fighting Russia. During a meeting at the Pentagon, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and UK Defense Minister Grant Shapps focused on asset deployment to prevent further destabilization following Hamas's attack on Israel and the ensuing battle. Since the Hamas attack, the U.S. military has sought to deter other Israeli adversaries by moving assets into the region. And this includes the deployment of USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower to the eastern Mediterranean. The force includes the carrier, a guided missile cruiser, and 4 guided missile destroyers.
We've seen the barbaric acts of Hamas.
Israelis in Turkey are boarding evacuation flights after their government told them to leave the country immediately. Protests were held around Turkey after hundreds of Palestinians were killed in a hospital in the deadliest incident in Gaza of the Israel-Hamas war. Security forces were stationed outside the Israeli consulate in Istanbul after thousands staged protests and tried to force their way into the consulate's compound. In Ankara, a symbolic funeral prayer was held for those killed in the hospital in addition to a march to show support for Palestinians. Lebanese security forces used tear gas and water cannon to repel scores of protesters demonstrating near the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Protesters said that this was against Israel's attack on a hospital in Gaza that killed hundreds of Palestinians. The United States has been targeted for criticism across the region for pledging ironclad support for Israel in its war against Hamas. Demonstrators were prevented from entering the embassy's boundary by barricades blocking roads hundreds of meters. Some protesters waved Palestinian flags while others hurled stones at the security forces. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that Beijing is ready to work with the United Nations to make solid progress in Belt and Road cooperation. Xi expressed that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres attending the BRF for the third time in a row demonstrates the UN support for the Belt and Road initiative. Xi said that this year marks the 10th anniversary since he proposed the BRI, adding that Belt and Road cooperation has demonstrated robust vitality and vigor. Guterres, for his part, expressed congratulations on China, marking the BRI's first decade of achievements. China has signed $97.2 billion worth of business contracts with other countries at the Belt and Road Forum this week, a total of 458 deals. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that the new stage of the Belt and Road Initiative will focus on green development, aiming to make it a distinct emblem of this mega project. Representatives of more than 130 countries, largely from the global south, attended the forum, including several heads of state. The most prominent was Russian President Vladimir Putin, referred to by Chinese President Xi Jinping as his dear friend. The US Air Force showcased its nuclear-capable bomber B-52 at a South Korean airbase on Thursday amid North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The key US strategic asset landed at an airbase in Cheongju after taking part in an air show at Seoul Air Base to mark the opening of the Seoul International Aerospace and Defense Exhibition 2023. The United States had flown its nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to the Korean peninsula multiple times in a show of strength against North Korea, but this was the first time that the bomber landed at an air base in South Korea. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is in North Korea to hold meetings with top officials. This is seen as setting the stage for a visit by President Vladimir Putin, who has stepped up cooperation with politically isolated North Korea. Lavrov's two-day visit comes a month after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a rare trip to Russia, during which he invited Putin to Pyongyang and discussed military cooperation, including over North Korea's satellite program. Speaking at a reception hosted by the North, Lavrov said that Moscow deeply values Pyongyang's unwavering and principled support for the war in Ukraine. Ahead of the planned return of former Prime Minister of Pakistan Nawaz Sharif, the Islamabad High Court has granted him protective bail in 2 corruption cases until October 24th. Nawaz Sharif is slated to return to Pakistan on October 21st after spending over 4 years in self-imposed exile. Sharif was deposed in 2018 and handed a 10-year prison sentence in a corruption case for owning assets beyond known income. In another case, Sharif was sentenced to 7 years in jail. On Wednesday, his party lawyers moved the court seeking protective bail in these 2 cases. U.S. House of Representatives is still without a speaker. Nominee Jim Jordan, a conservative from Ohio and a strong ally of former U.S. President Donald Trump, has lost a second vote to hold the crucial post. Now this as 22 Republicans refused to support him, while 20 had opposed him during the first round of voting. Jordan earned 200 votes in the first roll call on Tuesday, while 199 in the second roll call on Wednesday. He fell short of the 217 votes he needed to become the Speaker of the House that his party controls by a slim 221 to 212 majority. Jordan says that he would keep fighting to secure majority votes. The next round of voting is expected to take place on Thursday.
No further nominations.
The first U.S. flight to Venezuela under a new Biden administration initiative has landed in Venezuela's Caracas. These deportations are part of a tougher approach to border enforcement as the U.S. struggles with record illegal crossings. Venezuelan state television showed the Venezuelan citizens getting off the plane at Simon Bolivar International Airport, receiving medical checks and being registered by immigration officials once they arrived. The Biden administration has grappled with record numbers of migrants attempting to cross the US-Mexico border illegally, a trend fueled by a sharp increase in Venezuelans fleeing economic and political instability. The Joe Biden administration has broadly eased sanctions on Venezuela's oil sector in response to a deal reached between the government and opposition parties for the 2024 election. This move also paves the way for banned opponents of President Maduro to compete in next year's election. The U.S. Treasury has issued general licenses authorizing transactions involving Venezuela's oil and gas sector and gold sector, as well as removing the ban on secondary trading. This, however, can be amended or revoked at any time if the electoral deal falls through. The move marks the Biden administration steady shift towards increased engagement with Venezuela. NASA's InSight lander has discovered the largest quake ever recorded on Mars, measuring 4.7 on the magnitude scale. This Martian tremor may not sound big on Earth, but it's a substantial shake for our neighboring planet. Initially, scientists thought it might be due to an impact from a meteorite, but no crater was found. Experts have now concluded that the quake was actually triggered by tectonic activity within Mars itself, and this discovery sheds light on the seismic activities and the interiors of Mars. Ford Motor Company said a proposal by President Joe Biden's administration to hike vehicle fuel economy standards through 2032 threatens to cause quote-unquote substantial economic hardship for the number 2 U.S. automaker. Ford's comments represent the latest attack by the auto industry on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's proposal announced in July to increase vehicle fuel efficiency requirements by 2% per year for passenger cars and by 4% per year for pickup trucks and SUVs from 2027 through 2032. The European Central Bank took a further step towards launching a digital version of the euro that would let people in the 20 countries that share the single currency make electronic payments securely and free of charge. The ECB said that it would start a 2-year preparation phase for the digital euro on November 1st, and the European Central Bank said that it would finalize rules, choose its private sector partners, and do some testing and experimentation. Now remember, a number of countries have already launched digital currencies, while countries like India and China have rolled out pilot projects. The Indian rupee edged higher against the US dollar. However, the further escalation of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and the rise in oil prices might cap the upside of the Indian rupee and benefit a safe haven asset like the USD. Furthermore, the Indian rupee might encounter challenges as $5 billion RBI swap transaction is set to mature next week. Traders are concerned about the dollar supply in the Indian banking system, as experts believe the Reserve Bank of India could buy USD for its reserves instead of extending the deal. Liverpool and Egypt forward Mohamed Salah has called for world leaders to come together to prevent further slaughter of innocent souls amid the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The 31-year-old is the most famous Arab footballer currently and has posted on social media after being criticized for his silence. Salah has appealed for humanitarian aid to Gaza must be allowed as the people face terrible conditions there. Salah comments came after hundreds were killed by an explosion at a crowded hospital in Gaza City on Tuesday.